All right, welcome to 1000 Words with J.S. Morin. The idea here is that they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. We're going to test that premise, and we're going to do so by taking an image that I've never seen before, selected from a channel on our Discord that I don't ever look at, and I am going to make up a microfiction story on the spot, on camera, in front of you all, that I'll aim for about 1,000 words with, and we'll see what we come up with. So, without further ado, let's go. All right, meet Mig. Mig grew up in a small village on the outskirts of a great empire. His father was a knight. His mother stayed home to take care of him when the kingdom went to war. The empire took over. He hadn't seen his father since. By day, Mig played with his friends. They were all soldiers and wizards and princesses and princes. They frolicked in the woods. All they had were games and occasional chores. It was a happy time. But every time the kids went home, there were empty chairs. Everyone had lost someone in the wars. Everyone remembered that they used to live in a kingdom that was now an empire. And it wasn't their empire. They were part of the empire, not the other way around. But Mig had his way of coping. Mig was planning Mig was planning a rescue. His mother had told him that his father had been captured in the war, not killed. It wasn't the kind of thing you told a kid if you could find any way not to. Not if you had any sense of pity for the kid. And Mig's mom loved him. She was going to get by. It was a village. They took care of one another. Even if the empire ground them to dust, they still needed food and they still needed farmers. Someone had to grow everything. Soldiers couldn't live on blood. Mig had never wanted to be a wizard or a prince or a princess, really. He wanted to be a knight like his father. And being a knight meant being brave. That was the first thing. Back in the old days, knights fought with swords, and he had a little wooden sword. A modern knight needed a little bit more than that, though. They needed radios, they needed pistols, sometimes rifles. But Mig wasn't allowed any of those things. He had a little wooden sword, and he had a grandfather who had been a wizard. It wasn't Dad's father, it was Mom's. But he'd gone away a long time ago. He hadn't been captured. Mom and Dad had been a little fuzzy on where he'd actually gone. They didn't say he had died either, and he was old enough that maybe they would have. So Mig didn't know quite what to make of his father's disappearance, and he wasn't taking it lying down. A lot of Granddad's old things had been stored up in the attic. Mig wasn't allowed in the attic, but Mom slept, and she was a sound sleeper. And Mig had a big imagination, and he liked to explore. Exploring the attic was really nice and safe. He could listen to old radio programs. He could poke through Granddad's old stuff, look at the little statues, play with the candles, read the old books, even if he didn't read that well. The books had pictures. Some of the pictures weren't pictures, really, but they weren't words either. Like, they were thin and lines. And they weren't anything else except magic. If you looked at them sideways, if you looked at them out of the corner of your eye, they moved. If you held still long enough and stared at the middle of a picture, it would shift around where you were looking. And that's why when Mig found a painting in Granddad's old things that shone with sunlight, he knew that he had a chance. It was a picture of the old mountain where the capital city now stood. Blackspire. Oh, they'd renamed it when the Empire took over. The city that built up around it was hundreds of years old. The little dirt path in the painting had been paved and widened and paved again. But Granddad's old picture still showed how it used to be. And when Mig put his fingers to the picture, they went in. One night after Mig's mom was asleep, Mig found himself a ball of yarn, tied it around a post, gathered up a backpack with all his supplies. It had a pillow and a little blanket, 8 crayons, and 4 pieces of rolled up paper to write on, in case he needed to send messages. And so he took up his wooden sword, grabbed his ball of yarn so he could find his way back, and set out. He played out the line, unrolling the ball of yarn, back, 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 until it ran out. Balls of yarn had seemed endless when he was little. When he used to play with them in the room where his mother was sewing or knitting. But as it turned out, a walk for about 10 minutes and you were out of yarn. There was a little square on the ground. It looked like an attic. It didn't glow with sunlight, but he could still see inside it, just a little bit. He could see a candle he'd left burning. Meg had to decide. He could follow the yarn back. Didn't even really need the yarn at this point. He could still see where he'd been. He could turn back or he could keep going. He could head for Darkspire, see if he could find his dad. What Mig didn't realize when he turned away from that hole leading back to his home was that one day he would found that empire. He would conquer the Darkspire. He would beat back the hordes of monsters that called it home in search for a father who wouldn't be born for centuries. By the time he realized that he'd gone back in time, it was too late to return. The yarn was gone, the hole was gone. He was stuck. Someday he'd have to find a way to leave a message, to explain, to comfort a mother who'd lost her son, to comfort a father who'd gone to war. In his old age, he realized that he'd never be able to explain any of this to their satisfaction. That someday his descendants would conquer the land that he would one day call home, or had already called home. Even living with it for his entire life, Mig wasn't sure. But he was the first emperor of the Darkspire Empire. And I think that's what we'll call this, first emperor. Little Mig setting out to go rescue his dad and ends up setting in motion the same events that will eventually lead to his homeland's war. Not sure, but that one did feel like it was probably shorter than the Rufus story. If I'm going to guess, and this is just going by feel, Rufus went over 1,000 words and Mig went under. But I really like that Mig story. That's an adorable picture. I started telling the story before I realized the radio on the ground, that it was in the modern era. Yeah, Kristen has to do a bunch of post-processing after she clips stuff out of the VOD for this. And we'll get word counts and shareable links for people who weren't able to stay here or show up today for whatever reason. We won't judge them too harshly to their faces. You're welcome to think of them what you will behind closed doors. I also think they're good people, but not everyone can be everywhere.
All right, that was a 1,000-word short story, give or take. We'll find out when we go to publish this. And if you would like to participate in a future 1,000 words challenge, you can go to the Discord. That's just discord.gg/authorjsmorin and go to the 1,000 words channel. Upload your picture. Just follow the rules on there. It's pretty simple. Just stay away from copyrighted materials and whatnot. Nothing offensive. And you may get chosen to have your picture be the target of my next 1,000-word short story. Thank you.